Welcome back. South Africa has been rated as a country with the highest number of people who are in distress in the world. That's according to the annual Mental State of the World report. The report captured over 220,000 responses from 34 countries across the globe. We are now joined by Vanessa Da Trindade from the Psychologist, Counselling and Careers Development Unit at the University of Witwatersrand. Vanessa, thank you so much for joining us here on the late edition. Of course, very important report there. Also talking about mental health and the state of, South Africans' mental well-being. Are you surprised by the outcomes of that report?
Thank you for having me, Bali, and certainly not. I think South Africa stems from a historical background that is heightened with stress, and the more years have passed, the more intensified the levels of anxiety that people can experience. Just in terms of the economy, in terms of mental stress, physical stress. So it's not surprising. Our history really speaks to the level of anxiety that we may experience, but we are not the only country that is experiencing the level of anxiety and stress.
And analysing that report, what would you say are the contributing factors to South Africa being number one, according to this report in the world?
There are various contributing factors. For one, our economy is a challenging factor. Something as simple as we are experiencing energy crisis in the country. All of those minor basic necessities or basic services impact the amount of level or experience that an individual can cope with. I mean, there's an outbreak of possible cholera outbreak. So that is affecting us. We had experienced a world pandemic. There is lack of basic services. If we're looking at Maslow's hierarchy of needs, at the very basic, we're looking at the physiological factors such as food, water. In order for us to get to a sense where we are feeling secure, where we are feeling that we are safe, in order to move to a more confident, self-actualizing country and the individuals that are in there. So there's a variety of factors that can contribute to it.
And I like the fact that you actually touch on the issue of load shedding, because some people might downplay it and say, well, how does load shedding actually affect your mental well state? When you look at the impact of load shedding, because, a number of South Africans have bemoaned how it's very frustrating to get home and you have no electricity, and you wake up in the morning, there's still no electricity. How does that impact, the livelihoods of South Africans?
Well, certainly speaking, just even from personal experience, your daily living, your daily life, as you said, is impacted tremendously. I mean, you either waking up without electricity or you're going to bed without electricity. That already impacts the mood state that one is then going to experience. And when your mood state is then impacted, that can ultimately influence how you are then going to experience or perceive the rest of your day, whether that being at a place of employment, whether that be at a place where there is developmental growth. It just impacts you. So your ability to have the experience of more oxytocin, where it creates a buffer for you to be able to go through your daily life challenges and be more motivated to face them, is then lowered because the cortisol levels are so intensified with all the basic services that are lacking to a certain extent for many South Africans.
And many across the world or around the world are coming out from COVID-19, where we all had to stay indoors and we couldn't go out and and be social beings. Surely COVID-19 is also something that has contributed to how people live now, because many say that their lives have changed since COVID-19, and many have not gotten their lives back to what it was before.
Certainly. I mean, everyone's life was impacted and affected in one way or the other. Many people lost their jobs. That when you lose a job, it's as though you're experiencing grief. That impacts how you are going to experience your world, impacts your mental health, your stress levels. So the residue of the pandemic then is left with many people experiencing a sense of emptiness, a sense of loss, a sense of grief, a sense of even experiencing some depressive symptoms. Just also with social media, there's a double-edged sword where you never seem to either completely get it, or you are getting it and still feel a sense of disconnect. And we are social beings. Biologically, we are social beings. And the need for belonging, the need for connection can also help in us building resiliency towards lowering the levels of distress. So definitely the pandemic has impacted many South Africans in various ways. And I mean, just to say the least, if we have a water shortage, that is going to impact your daily life. If you don't have electricity, that is going to, if you've lost your job, if you're struggling in terms of maybe academically and feeling as though you're not performing, the imposter syndrome, all of those aspects impact and have been impacting even since the pandemic.
And Vanessa, you are mentioning a number of contributing factors that many of us actually encounter on a daily basis. I mean, there is a water challenge currently taking place in the country in various municipalities. And one would ask that, how difficult does it then become for somebody to get out of that mindset? Because, sometimes you can be trapped in your state of depression. Surely it's something very difficult that many South Africans are dealing with.
Certainly, and in plain basic sense, having access to just services like having access to a therapy session, whether at a community clinic or at a community district hospital, just for you to have a place of safety to go and communicate share how you're feeling, what you're experiencing. Being given access to the basic services, building a resiliency. So the thing with stress is the level of stress is what we also need to consider. The more intensified the level of stress, the higher the inability for one to cope. Right? But the more resources that you have, like connection, like having therapy, having group sessions, ability to find facilities that, for instance, like Lifeline, that give you free services, that can boost up your sense of resiliency, because resiliency is often described as bouncing back. But actually, if you're thinking about it, we want to be able to bounce forward. If we're bouncing back, we're going back to the normal way of living. And we want to be able to bounce forward so that we are working towards a stronger sense of self, whether it be physical, mental, or just in everyday functioning. So that's also something to consider.
All right.
So there's a variety of resources available. Sometimes even the lack of information to get those resources to you.
All right, then. Thank you very much indeed. That is Wits psychologist Vanessa Da Trindade, also there just giving advice to those who may be impacted and having challenges with mental health problems.